Another multi-generational tool from Milwaukee. Yes, we've got Gen 2 of the Milwaukee right angle die grinder. Specifically, it's the model number 3485, which the original was the 2485. And now this is more powerful, more torquey, and more features at relatively the same size. Now let's dig in and take a closer look. We're even going to compare these things because I know that's what you want to see. So we'll compare these out of the gate, then we'll dig into the features. And I have a bunch of tips to bring to you as well. Okay, here's the challenge. We've got 2 screws driven down in here, and we're going to grind the heads off and grind it all the way down to the wood. We're going to use both tools. We tried this several times, trying to use my right hand and left hand. It was just not a fair competition at all. Couldn't tell the difference, I couldn't balance out the power input of my 2 different hands, obviously with my right hand being dominant. So I'm going to do right hand with the new tool and right hand with the old tool, and we'll compare the times. And we're going to be using brand new 3M Cubitron 60 grit discs on a 3-inch backing plate. We're going to use the same backing plate on both. Same amount of offset. Try to keep this as even as possible. And I just want to be able to maybe show the difference in power output on this. So here we go. Actually, let's use the old one first. And there we go. You saw the time on it. Brand new Cubitron disc. And you saw it cut out a couple of times in speed 4. And here we go. So no cutouts at all on that. And in fact, in the beginning, I wasn't even pressing the trigger all the way in. There is a stronger spring on this, by the way. So I really had to grab it more, and then I actually got more power. So the first, 15 seconds or so, I wasn't even full power. So a definite difference in power on the new 3485. Let me point out that this tool was one of the most hated on tools out of the gate when Milwaukee released this. And it was almost laughable to me because many of the same people that complained about it, that it wasn't powerful enough, that it didn't really replace their air tool or their air die grinder, they still went on to use this tool all the time. And out of the gate, I mentioned that in my review that no, it is not the tool that's going to totally replace your air grinder because the power wasn't quite there yet, but it was a very handy tool, and we've proved that it's used all the time. So we're really excited that we've got something more powerful to see now. Milwaukee's brand new model number 3485, and this is their M12 FUEL right angle die grinder. This is Gen 2, so generation 2 of this tool, and all the haters have now been notified because there were plenty of haters for this tool right here, which came before this tool, obviously. So they look a lot alike, and there's quite a bit of differences as well. In fact, there's probably more differences than there are similarities, other than that it's basically accomplishing the same tasks, just better. Right away, you can see, by the way, this is the old 2485, and this is the 3485. So I like the model number because it was just a, 4 series jump. So 2485, 3485. Modes, still get 4 modes. However, this tool was rated at like 24,500 RPM. This one's rated at a top of 20,000 RPM. I don't think that's a big deal at all. I think most of your tools maybe, or most of your bits that are rated at 25,000 RPM, but can you tell the difference between 20,000 and 25,000? Probably not. Probably still accomplishing a lot of the same work. This tool is definitely more torquey, and that is where it was needed, because the hate that came from this tool was everybody hating on it because it would bog down. And rightly so in some of it, but as I've explained already, a lot of that was just a lot of complaining, because there's still plenty of people that use this tool and used it quite often. In fact, you can tell with this, it gets used almost daily in the shop. It literally sits on this shop top or on this work top and gets used all the time. Anyway, so the new 3485 rated at 20,000 RPM, 4 modes here, a little bit different on changing the modes, as you can see. I also like the fact we get the fuel gauge right there on the back where the speeds are. This fuel gauge was here on the side of the tool, but again, speeds here are on speed 1. And by the way, you have to almost give definitely a pronounced, push of the mode button. Not that it's hard at all, but you're not going to accidentally brush across it and change the modes or change the speeds. And speed setting on this is 0 to 6,000 RPM on the number 1 setting. On the number 2 setting is going to be 0 to 10,000 RPM. On the number 3 is 0 to 15,000, and on the 4 is 0 to 20,000. Now I say 0 because in addition to basically your top speeds is what you're setting with the mode button, with your trigger, you have that variable speed. So I can feather in the speed I want, even though I've got it on speed 4, I can slow that down. So I will say most of the time, my die grinder is set on the top speed, because if I want to slow it down, I can slow it down. And most of the time I'm buffing or sanding or something like that, and I want that high speed. When I want to really lay into it, I can. Otherwise, just like on a drill, I'm just going to ease in and slow it down wherever I need to. Now, if you're doing things like aluminum, now you may want to set that top speed down just to slow that bit down a little bit, and you can just grab the throttle and not worry about it. Anyway, it's there if you want it. The handle, if you look at the handle, very barrel grip, baseball grip type of grip here on the old 2485. The new one looks almost like the stubby impact wrench, if you're used to them. They have more of a profound kind of hourglass shape there, so little nicer fit to the hand. Not that I've ever complained about this one, but I think people with smaller hands didn't like the bulk of this grip, so they may like this one a little more. Didn't bother me, but I understand where people might have not liked it. Also, people hated on this kind of pneumatic style trigger. This paddle switch did not bother me one bit. Again, there's plenty of complaints out there about it. I get it. If you don't like a trigger, you don't like a trigger. Never bothered me. However, everybody loves this new style trigger as well. That one doesn't bother me either. Just saying that this is what most of your pneumatic die grinders have, is this style trigger right here. Never bothered me. Light is quite a bit different. Light we had shining up from the bottom up here toward your hand. People would say, okay, your hand gets in the way, your pinky gets in the way, whatever. I get that too. These lights are up here on the head, kind of like the impact wrenches have gone to and the impact drivers. And again, that's nice, but can I just share something with you? And listen, this is not a complaint at all, but how good do you see that light now? So once you put a 3-inch sanding disc on there, that light is doing nothing for you. I'm not complaining. Kudos to Milwaukee for putting a light on it. Same thing with the light down here. I just think a die grinder, if you get light working for you, then great, absolutely wonderful. If not, I don't think it's a wrong place, wrong time type of thing. It's just a tool that your bits and work pieces are going to get in the way of the light. It's not something like a impact driver or drill where maybe you need some light in a dark area. Again, if it's there, great. You'll see here in the business end of the tool, the motor, obviously we're running a larger brushless motor to get that power out, and you can see it in the diameter of the body here at the top. As far as height-wise, it's really about the same. You'll see it's longer here in the body. However, we had more of the shaft of bit holder, collet holder sticking out here because we had to put a wrench down here, which gets to another feature that they've added. and that is we don't have to have 2 wrenches. In fact, they only send 1 wrench with a tool, and that's the bigger wrench up here for the collet, because we have a little spindle lock right here that you can push, and when it gets to the right spot, it's going to lock out, and then you can put your wrench on it and tighten it or loosen it. Now, we're still running a safety collet. So as I mentioned about the tips, that's our first tip right there, is this is a safety collet. People argue with me still to this day. I made a couple of videos about it because there were so many people getting frustrated at this tool right here because they couldn't get their bits out. They were putting them in vices. They were hitting them with hammers. And quite frankly, we did too the first couple of times we used it. And guess what? Guess where the answer is? Yeah, in the manual. Wood routers have been using this technology for a long time, and that is what you would call a safety collet or a self-release collet. So let me tighten this down. I'm going to tighten it down pretty good here. And so now we've got our bit in, and we want to take that bit out. So I'm going to push my spindle lock again, get that around, and now I'm going to break this free. So now that nut is broken free. You can see it's easy to spin. I cannot get that bit out. I can't pull it out. I can't beat it out and release it. I can't beat on that nut and release it. It's not going to release. You can put it in a vise and you can ruin everything. However, watch this. Again, I'm going to push my spindle lock. And now it's locked out. Now that nut is going to get hard again. So it's spinning easy. Back it off. And now it's hard once again. Take your wrench, break it free once more, and now look at this. That is how a safety collet or a self-release collet works. It's quite a bit different than your typical collet. Here's a collet that you would see on a typical air tool right here, okay? Here is MIlwaukee's safety collet or self-release collet. It's captured on the collet nut. Now I can push this out. And there's our safety collet. Again, quite a bit different than the typical air collet that you're used to. And you see where it captures it on that ring right there. And by the way, if it ever comes off and it's separated, make sure that you push this back into the collet nut before you put it on the tool, because it will not work right and it will jam. But people argue with me all the time, even after making videos, that, oh, you need to wrap it with a wrench, or, oh, you just need to knock it back into itself. And I'm telling you, that's not how this works. So just make sure that when you're loosening your collet nut, that you loosen it twice. You'll break it free, spin it off a few turns, and then you'll have to break it free again, and the bit will let loose. Now, MIlwaukee recommends up to 3-inch for sanding. So that's a 3-inch backing plate with a 3-inch sander on there. And they're recommending only 2-inch discs for cutting, and then 1-inch burr bit. So if you're using a burr bit for a die grinder, nothing bigger than 1 inch if you're actually molding steel, aluminum, things like that. Hey, let us know if you'd like to see a certain test with this, or a certain tip, or you have a tip or a trick or something else, anything surrounding die grinders. Let us know in the comments. Now, I do have another tip for you. Now, most of our bits and cutting accessories, sanding accessories, we buy from our local welding supplier. Some stuff we buy online, but a lot of the stuff we go to the welding supplier, much cheaper than, say, a Home Depot or a Lowe's or something like that. But a lot of times they don't carry 2-inch cutting discs or 2-inch sanding abrasives. So when your pneumatic cutoff tool or your Milwaukee cutoff tool or DeWalt cutoff tool or whatever cutoff tool that you like is down, you take your 3-inch cutting disc and you've worn it slapped down, kind of like this one. I know some of you are saying, man, you could still get some life out of that, and I agree with you. But just for the sake of a video, I'm going to show you that now I'm going to take that and I'm going to save it. I'm going to put it on one of my pegs or in one of my drawers, and then now that becomes a 2-inch cutting disc or 1.5 inch cutting disc for my right angle die grinder. So just kind of passing it along, that you can pass along your bits to other tools, and it's just like you got something for free. So that's your tip number 2. Using your cutoff wheels out of your 3-inch cutoff tool to use so that you can run it in your smaller, 1 inch, 2 inch cutoff disc for the die grinder. Now, tip number 3 is make sure you're running a high output battery on this tool. You will thank me later, or at least you won't hate me later. If you're trying to run a regular XC battery or a regular CP battery like a 2.0 or a 1.5, you are not going to be happy with this tool because it's going to drain that battery fast. And not only that, you're going to have power drop off very quickly. What you need is a larger capacity battery. In fact, I would recommend even against the CP 2.5. If you have to, that's great. You'll probably get the same power initially, but you'll have more fall off as the battery drops to say 50% or so. You'll notice that drop off more because as soon as you torque the tool down, it's actually going to drain that battery, and you're going to notice again that power drop off sooner with the CP with the smaller battery. So highly recommend a high output XC 5.0. That even means that not just running a 6.0 battery, because that's just a bigger capacity battery. The high output is the 5.0 or the 2.5. Will it work with the smaller batteries or with the XC 4.0 or the XC 3.0 or with the CP 2.0, 1.5? Yes, it will work, but you're just not going to be happy with it, and it's not going to have the power. Now, tip number 4. Here's tip number 4. Maybe you have some, let's just use the word, some Dremel bits laying around, whether you have a Ryobi Dremel tool or a Dremel tool, regardless, we understand, right? These little drum sanders and these little sanding bits, things like that. Maybe you want to use those in this tool. Can you do it? Yes, absolutely you can. There's a couple of different ways you can do it. One that I do not recommend, and I'm just going to show you here. You can go on to Amazon and you can buy these adapters, and this is a 1/4 inch to 1/8 inch adapter, and this literally slides inside of your collet and then makes it an 1/8 inch. However, what there is not is a capture nut on this. So you're just using the friction of the collet to hold this collet. So you got a collet on a collet. Again, I don't recommend that. MIlwaukee actually sells an 1/8 inch collet for these tools. You can actually buy this tool, and then your bits will slide right in there, and you can use this on this tool. You just have to spin this off, take off your 1/4 inch collet, and put on your 1/8 inch collet. We'll put a link in the description if you're interested in that. So that is your tip number 4. And let's talk about aluminum. Let's say you're using a burr bit on aluminum. Now, a burr bit works great. A carbide burr bit works great at, porting iron and steel and cutting holes in things and enlarging holes, keyholing things. They work really well. However, when you use a regular carbide burr bit, I say that because you can get aluminum burr bits, but you don't have to. When you use it in aluminum, what aluminum does, it's softer and it will actually clog up these teeth. So you see the teeth there, and you'll see here. And you'll see the pieces of aluminum getting impregnated in the carbide burrs. Now, there's an easy remedy. Wax. You can use paraffin, you can use candle wax. This is Brute Cutting Lube from Champion Tools, and I love this for drilling holes. Just get you some good wax on there. And by the way, I've got aluminum embedded in there, but this will help clean that out as well. And if you see it start filling up, which, by the way, did you notice that? So the wax in there helped clean out that, and it kind of lubricates that. While it's hot, I can just stick it back in there. But then you get that cutting power the whole time, because if you don't do that, as soon as you start cutting, it loads up the bit and it quits cutting. So you lose performance as well as your bit gets all kind of stuff put in it. So I can put more wax on there, and that will help clean it out. Now I've got a clean bit for the most part. I don't have to take a pick and pick everything out of it. So use wax when you're using a burr bit with aluminum. And another tip for you is backing plates, or our backing plates, if you will. So here I've got that same 3-inch Cubitron disc that we ground down the bolt with, and you can see I've got a rusty piece of aluminum with mud on it, or not aluminum, that's steel. Anyway, and I get a real harsh grind, which is what I'm wanting here on something like this. But let's say that you didn't want such a harsh grind, or maybe even needed to kind of feather out where paint may be, something like that. Watch this. Take a 2-inch backing plate with a 3-inch disc, and now you kind of get a feathered edge. Not kind of, you definitely get a feathered edge, and you can be softer on that. Now, if I need to, I can get on the meat of it. But again, if I need to kind of feather an area, or maybe even get around the corner or something like that, it gives me some flexibility on the edge of that disc. And it's not so harsh. I still get the cutting power of the 60 grit or 40 grit or 80 grit or 120, whatever I've got on there. But again, it's just kind of a less harsh and more of a feathered edge that I can put on it. So that's very handy regardless of what die grinder you're using. Now I'm giving you some bonus tips here, but this is one of the biggest mistakes I see when it comes to using die grinders. People go and pick up these cheap wire wheels and really don't look at the specs on them. And a lot of these are meant to be used in drills. And you've got a 25,000 RPM air tool or the Milwaukee die grinder that spins these things a lot. You don't want a piece of wire, which happens very regularly, flying out of this at 20,000 RPM on something that's made for, if you actually look on this, I believe it says 4,500 RPM. And the same one here, max 4,500 RPM. So even on the low setting, it's exceeding these. Now this one here is actually a Weller bit, I believe, and it's rated at 25,000 RPM. So that's fine. It will work on that fine. But don't cheap out and buy accessories that are made for drills, especially like wire wheels, where you're going to have flinging projectiles that are flying everywhere, possibly getting in your eye. And lastly, if you're going to be using a tool like this on any type of mating surfaces on engines, like cylinder heads, grab the LS3 head. That was smart. Anyway, so like this is obviously trying to seal compression. That one ate a valve. Anyway, do not use anything other than like a Rolock bristle disc on this. And arguably people are going to say, do not do that, blah, blah, blah. And I get it. I absolutely get it. Word of caution, if you think this is the wrong thing to do, then don't do it. I will do it. I'm very careful at it. Not saying it's right, but this bristle disc is not going to eat away at aluminum. Do not put a Scotch-Brite on it. Definitely don't put a sanding pad on it. And again, if you don't want to touch mating surfaces with it, then don't. But if you are going to use it on any type of aluminum where you need a fine finish, the bristle disc is the only way to go, because it wears away. It's not going to gouge the aluminum. Can you bite into it? Yeah, if you tried to, you could. You could probably put a flat bar on that and not really see anything, and I'm really bearing into it as much as I can. But here's a Scotch-Brite disc. It will definitely start eating into it. And by the way, this stuff will get into your engines, will clog up oil ports, and so not a smart thing to do. The little hairs will come out everywhere. And do not go on Amazon and buy the cheapy Rolock bristle discs. They don't work. They're junk. I know we've covered everything. Well, if we haven't covered everything, let me know in the comments what I didn't cover or what I should cover. Pricing on this is $219 for the bare tool. No battery, $219. No tool either, no bit in there either. And that comes with a 5-year warranty. Huge step up from the original. At the same time, as we mentioned in the opener, this tool was something that was used all the time anyway, even though people complained about it, and this one will be used even more. So check it out for yourself. Also keep track of us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and even TikTok. And if you don't mind, hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't done so already. And by all means, if you hated our video, well, give us a thumbs down, but let us know in the comments why. Have a great day and keep smiling.